I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped into the dim stairwell of my mother's apartment building, the air thick with old detergent and the faint smell of rust from the pipes. It was a scent that always dragged me back into memories I didn't want to relive: quiet dinners, tense silences, my mother's eyes always watching me too closely, as if she feared one day I would disappear just like my father had. But that evening felt different. Heavier. As if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My mother had called me earlier insisting I come over, her voice tight, almost trembling. She never trembled. Even during the worst arguments with my sister Emily, even during the years she worked 2 jobs and still pretended she wasn't exhausted, she never let her voice break. But today it had. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit. When I finally reached the door, my hand hesitated on the cold metal handle. My palm was slick, I wiped it on my coat, inhaled deeply, and pushed the door open. The soft yellow light of the entryway cast long shadows across the walls, stretching toward me like fingers. The framed photos, me and Emily at various childhood events, looked dull, almost ghostly. Emily's smile was always perfect in those pictures, while mine was uncertain, forced, as if I knew even back then that I was always a step behind her. My mother peeked from the kitchen, offering me a quick, tense greeting. She said she was glad I made it and that we had something important to talk about. But the way she said it, it wasn't relief. It was dread barely hidden behind a thin smile. She motioned for me to come in, and as I walked through the hallway, I noticed a bright red folder sitting on the dining table. She saw my eyes drift toward it and quickly pushed it aside, saying we would talk later and that I should relax for now. Relax. As if that was possible in this apartment where every silence felt like a secret waiting to jump out and choke me. I set my bag on the couch and tried to settle into the familiar yet suffocating space. My mother wiped her hands on a dish towel repeatedly, though they were already dry. The clock on the wall ticked so loudly I felt each second in my spine. She told me Emily was coming over too, that it was better if we were all together. And that's when the unease settled fully in my stomach, heavy, cold, undeniable. Emily arriving meant something serious. Because Emily never came to family discussions unless she already knew the outcome. By the time the door finally opened again, the tension in the room had thickened so much I could almost taste it. Emily entered the living room wearing her usual immaculate outfit, tailored coat, neat bun, heels that echoed on the floor like a gavel striking judgment. But her face gave her away. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with a faint darkness, and her lips trembled for half a second before she pressed them together. I'd only seen her look like that when something had gone terribly wrong. We all sat. My mother took the seat across from us, hands clasped, shoulders stiff. Emily crossed her legs and stared ahead silently. The pressure in my chest grew. Finally my mother reached for the red folder. But before she could open it, my phone vibrated loudly against the table. Ryan. My heart lurched, my pulse spiking with embarrassment. I flipped the phone face down, pretending it didn't matter. Ryan and I had been in this strange undefined space for months, late-night talks, long drives, moments that felt like almost love but dissolved by morning. I hated how much I cared. I hated how much control he had over my heartbeat. Not that I would ever admit that to anyone. Emily raised an eyebrow but said nothing. My mother's gaze flicked toward the phone with a mix of curiosity and worry. She always worried when a man's name showed up on my screen. She had a way of assuming every man would hurt me the way my father had hurt her. My mother exhaled shakily and opened the red folder. Inside were old papers, faded photographs, and a creased letter with someone else's handwriting, definitely not hers. My stomach dropped. She pushed the letter toward me, and in that moment, I swear the air in the room thinned. She said the letter was about me. Emily closed her eyes gently as if bracing for impact. As I slid the letter out, my hands shook. My mother bit her lip, her gaze softening with something like guilt, deep, long-buried guilt. The letter was from my father. Not the father who raised me for 6 years and then vanished. The father my mother always said had abandoned us, the one Emily rarely spoke about except in clipped, judgmental remarks. According to this letter, nothing my mother had told me about him was fully true. My father wrote that he loved me, that he never wanted to leave, that something happened, something my mother had kept from me. He said there were secrets, lies, misunderstandings. That he had been pushed out, cornered, trapped in a situation he couldn't escape. And that the secret had to do with me. My breathing turned shallow. A buzzing filled my ears. My mother reached toward me as if to calm me, but I pulled back, not angrily, just instinctively, like a reflex from a wound I didn't know I had. Emily watched me closely, her expression unreadable but strangely soft, as though she knew something I didn't. And it hit me, even before anyone admitted anything, I was the only one in the room who didn't know the full story. As if on cue, my phone vibrated again. This time, I didn't even need to turn it over. I knew it was Ryan. Except when I glanced, it wasn't. It was a name I hadn't expected at all. Chloe. Ryan's best friend's little sister. A girl I'd only met twice, both times with polite small talk and awkward smiles. Overly shy, overly observant, the kind of girl who watched everything quietly from a corner. Her message popped up immediately after. You need to know something. It's about Ryan. Please call me. My blood ran cold. I locked the phone quickly before my mother or Emily could read more. But the damage was done. Emily had seen enough to frown, my mother tightened her lips nervously. Whatever Chloe wanted to tell me couldn't be good. And I already felt fragile, as if one more secret would collapse everything I'd ever known about myself. My mother asked gently if I could put the phone away so we could focus. I nodded, sliding it into my bag. But my thoughts were spiraling, between the letter, my mother's trembling hands, Emily's quiet panic, and Chloe's ominous message about Ryan. My mother tried to explain the letter. She said that the year I was born had been complicated, that she and the man I thought was my father had broken things off temporarily. When she discovered she was pregnant, she wasn't sure what to do. When they reunited, she hid details, thinking she was protecting everyone. But I noticed the cracks in her story. The hesitations. The way she avoided Emily's eyes. Emily shifted, inhaling sharply, as if trying to decide whether to interrupt. My mother glared at her, not disrespectfully, but desperately, pleading silently for patience. I felt like I was watching a play where I was supposed to know my lines but didn't. Finally my mother said it. The man I grew up believing was my father was not my biological father. I felt the floor tilt under me. My vision blurred around the edges. I heard a faint ringing, like my consciousness was being pushed underwater. Emily whispered that she had known for years, that she had tried to tell me once, but our mother stopped her. My mother closed her eyes in shame when Emily said that. A surge of betrayal hit my throat like a blade. I stood up abruptly, unable to sit still while centuries of questions clawed at me from the inside. I demanded to know who my father was, but the words came out choked, barely audible. My mother said the man was someone I knew. Someone still in our lives. That sentence alone nearly knocked the breath out of me. I felt Emily tense beside me. My mother's voice quivered as she prepared to say the name. She never got the chance. Because at that exact moment, a knock thundered against the door. We all jerked toward the sound. My mother's face drained of all color. Emily rose halfway from her seat before freezing. Another knock, louder. More urgent. My mother whispered that I shouldn't open the door. Her voice had turned into a thin thread of panic. But it was too late. The doorknob turned from the outside. The hinges creaked slowly. The door opened. And standing there, framed by the empty hallway, his chest rising and falling as if he had run all the way here, was Ryan. For a long moment, none of us moved. But the real shock wasn't that he was there. It was my mother's reaction. She stared at him with absolute horror. Emily's lips parted in disbelief. And Ryan? Ryan didn't look at me first. He looked at my mother. Not with confusion. Not with politeness. But with accusation. As if they had unfinished business. As if they'd known each other for years. As if I had just walked into the middle of a story I didn't even know I was part of. My knees weakened. Because the expression on Ryan's face said something I couldn't even begin to comprehend. Something life-altering. Something terrifying. And I knew, before anyone said a single word, that nothing about my family, my past, or even my relationship with Ryan was what I thought it was. The way Ryan stood in the doorway made my skin prickle. He looked like a man who had walked straight into a crime scene and realized he might be the main suspect. His chest rose and fell too fast, his jaw was clenched so tightly that a vein in his neck pulsed visibly. For a second, our eyes met, and I felt that familiar rush of warmth in my chest, the one I hated myself for, the one that belonged to all those nights when I had secretly hoped he would finally call what we had something real. But then his gaze slid past me and locked onto my mother. And whatever I saw in his eyes then was not warmth, or guilt over mixed signals, or even ordinary discomfort. It was something else. Something fierce and complicated and laced with resentment. My mother whispered his name under her breath like it was a ghost she thought she had buried. Her hand gripped the arm of the chair so hard I thought the wood might splinter. Emily did not even try to hide her shock, she turned to me with a look that said clearly that this was not part of the plan. I realized in that moment that everyone in that room knew something I did not. And Ryan's presence was not a coincidence. My mother forced herself up from the chair with a stiffness I had only seen in her on very bad days. She asked him in a strained voice what he was doing there. Not the way you speak to your daughter's almost boyfriend. More like the way you speak to someone who has just shown up with a loaded gun. Ryan pressed his lips together, then said that someone had to tell the truth and that he was done pretending he knew nothing. He said that he knew it was not his place, but he could not stay out of it any longer. My heart slammed against my ribs. His words were like static, half-formed in my mind, but the tone was unmistakable, cold determination. Emily shot him a sharp look and demanded to know who had told him to come. He glanced her way, and in that single glance, I saw something that made my stomach twist, a familiarity that felt too practiced, too old to be new. He said that Emily had texted him earlier. That she had told him I was finally being told the truth tonight and that if he had anything to say, he should come now. I turned to my sister so quickly that my neck hurt. Emily avoided my eyes, focusing on her hands instead as she rubbed her thumb over a faint imperfection on her nail. She said that someone had to make sure everything came out at once, that she was tired of the half-truths. She added that if he stayed away any longer, it would only make everything worse. My chest burned. My own sister had invited the man I was emotionally attached to into this disaster of a family meeting without telling me. It wasn't just a misstep, it felt like a betrayal. She had always taken control of stories that were mine to tell, but this felt like something else. Like she had taken the last little bit of privacy I had, placed it in her hands, and then thrown it into the middle of the room. My mother glared at Emily with raw fury, asking how she could do this, how she could drag Ryan into something that was not his concern. Emily snapped back that this stopped being just my mother's business the moment Ryan's name showed up in that letter and in the documents in the red folder. My eyes darted to the folder again. My mother's shoulders slumped as she realized the circle was closing in on her. A kind of frightened resignation settled over her features. She looked so much older suddenly that my anger flickered for a second, replaced by something almost like pity. Almost. Ryan stepped further into the room and closed the door quietly behind him. The air seemed to shift as soon as the latch clicked. There was no way out now, not for any of us. He looked at me properly then, and for a brief moment, his eyes softened. He whispered that he was sorry. Not the kind of sorry you say when you cancel a plan at the last minute. The kind that came from deep inside, from somewhere raw. The kind of sorry I did not yet understand but already hated. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to tell him to get out, that this had nothing to do with him, that I was barely holding myself together and his presence was like a match near gasoline. But my voice did not cooperate. I just stood there, my hands hanging uselessly at my sides, breathing too fast. My mother sank back into her chair and pressed her fingers against her temples. She said in a hoarse voice that this had gone far enough and that if the truth was finally going to come out, then it needed to come from her. She said that she refused to let this turn into some chaotic mess of accusations and half-confessions, that she owed me at least one honest story. The room went quiet except for the ticking clock and the faint sound of someone's uneven breathing, possibly mine. She started talking about the year I was born. She said that she and the man I had always called my father had separated for a few months after a massive argument. She said that her life back then felt like a pile of broken glass, sharp and impossible to hold. During that separation, she met someone else. She called him a mistake at first, but then hesitated and said that he was not really a mistake, just a complication that she never learned how to live with. His name was Michael Hart, she said. The name hit me like a punch. My vision tunneled. For a terrifying second, everything blurred and all I could really see was Ryan. Because his last name was Hart. I had always known it, but it had never meant anything to me. It was just a name, common enough, one I had never thought twice about. Ryan Hart. It had rolled off my tongue so easily those first few weeks, back when he was just someone who made me laugh and look forward to my phone lighting up. Now the name felt poisonous. My mother saw the way I stiffened, the way my eyes flicked to Ryan. Her breath caught. Emily closed her eyes tightly again, as if this was the exact moment she had been dreading. My mother said more, but the words came in fragments. She said that Michael had been older, married, established, with a career and a reputation. She said that he had promised he would leave his wife for her, that he would take care of her, that he would make a place for me in his life. She said that he had told her he loved her, that she had believed him because she had been lonely and angry and desperate to feel chosen. But things had changed when she discovered she was pregnant. He had panicked, she said. He had begged her to keep it quiet, told her that his marriage, his career, his sons could not survive a scandal. He had offered her money. He had said that he would always be there in secret, that he would make sure we had enough. She had refused to be hidden, and they fought. She said that the fight escalated to threats, to ultimatums, to her promising she would tell his wife and him promising he would deny everything. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard that my chest actually hurt. I looked at Ryan again and saw realization dawning on his face too as my mother spoke. Or maybe he had known all along and was only pretending to realize it now. I could not tell. The uncertainty made me feel sick. My mother said that eventually she had gone back to her ex, the man I believed was my father. She told him part of the truth but not all. She told him she had been with someone else but did not know exactly when she had conceived. She said that he had chosen to believe I was his, or at least to act as if I was. But the doubt had poisoned their marriage slowly. Fights, distance, resentment. Until he finally left when I was 6. She looked at me then with eyes full of apology. She said quietly that a test had been done at some point and that she had known ever since that Michael Hart was my biological father. The room spun. I felt my knees weaken and had to reach for the back of a chair. My fingers dug into the wood like I needed something to anchor me to this world, because everything else was slipping. Ryan Hart. Michael Hart. Hart. My brain raced through every conversation I had ever had with Ryan, his vague references to his family, the way he had always brushed off personal questions with a joke or a deflection. I remembered him saying once that his father traveled a lot, that he was in business, that he worked with lawyers and policymakers. I had never asked for a name. It had never occurred to me to ask. Why would it? Now every single piece of information I had ignored lined up inside my head like an accusation. I turned to Ryan with ice in my veins. I asked him in a strangled voice if his father's name was Michael. He closed his eyes briefly, as if the question itself hurt to hear, then nodded. Something inside my chest tore. Not physically, but it counted as pain all the same. A strange kind of ache that no one could see but that spread through my entire body like wildfire. My mother watched me with a horror I did not know how to forgive. Emily looked at the floor. Ryan stared at me, eyes wide, as if he wanted to reach for me and also wanted to back away at the same time. I remember thinking that this had to be some kind of mistake. That Hart was a common name. That the world couldn't be cruel enough to do this to me. I clung to that denial like a life raft. Emily finally spoke, her voice low and shaky. She said that this was what she had wanted to tell me years ago, that she had begged our mother to be honest before my life got tangled in it, but that she had been silenced. She said that she had thought she could at least control the damage by keeping an eye on me, by staying close. Yet she had invited Ryan here without warning me. Her idea of control looked a lot like betrayal from where I was standing. My mother whispered that she had not known about Ryan, that she had not known his last name until recently, that she had hoped it was just a coincidence. She had hoped, she said, that I would never be near anything connected to Michael's family again. Ryan let out a hollow, humorless sound. He said that it was never just a coincidence with Michael. He said that his father left traces wherever he went, that secrets followed him like a shadow. I stared at him, my pulse roaring in my ears. I asked him when he had found out about any of this. He hesitated for a moment, then admitted that he had suspected something for a while but only got confirmation recently. He said that a few weeks ago, he had overheard his parents arguing late at night. He had said his mother brought up my mother's name, Claire, and accused Michael of starting the cycle all over again, of endangering their family once more. She had said that the girl was an adult now, that she was someone they knew, that this was going too far. Michael had told her to drop it. He had said that he owed my mother nothing and that I was none of their business. My throat burned with a mixture of shame and fury. The way Ryan said it, I could almost hear his father's dismissive tone. Just a girl. None of their business. An old mistake. Ryan said that he had looked up my mother's name afterwards and eventually found me. He had already known me by then, and that detail made my head spin. He said he had realized who I was only after we had already gotten close, that his mind had tried to reject the possibility at first. He admitted that he had pulled away since then, that all the cautious distance, the sudden emotional absences, had come from the weight of what he knew and his inability to face it. I felt like someone had slapped me. That distance I had cried over in private, that coldness I had blamed on my own inadequacy, had been something else entirely. Not a lack of interest. A secret. A monstrosity sitting between us that he had refused to show me. Chloe's message flashed in my mind. You need to know something. It's about Ryan. I pictured her watching this whole thing from the sidelines, seeing Ryan unravel, realizing he was lying to me by omission and deciding she could not stand it. It struck me then that the person I had barely noticed, the quiet girl reblogging quotes and hiding behind oversized sweaters, might be the only person in this entire mess who had actually tried to protect me. My mother started crying then. Not the quiet, controlled kind of crying she did in the bathroom when she thought we were asleep, but full-bodied sobs that shook her shoulders and made her words come out in broken fragments. She said that she had never wanted this, that if she had known, she would have warned me, that she had spent years trying to make sure I never crossed paths with Michael's world again. Her words felt like too little, too late. I felt my anger turn sharp. I told her that secrets had a way of finding their way to the surface no matter how deep you buried them, that I was the one drowning in them now because she had tried to protect herself from shame. I did not raise my voice, but it came out edged with something that even surprised me. Emily tried to step in, telling me that our mother had done what she thought was best at the time, that she had been young and terrified and alone. She said that everyone in that room was hurting and that I needed to see that. But coming from someone who had just admitted she had been sitting on the truth for years, the argument rang hollow. I looked at Ryan and asked him if he had slept with me after suspecting that we might share a father. The question hung in the air, heavy and foul. His face crumpled. He shook his head immediately, saying no. He said that when he first had that horrible, nauseating thought that we might be related, he had stopped initiating anything physical, that he had started avoiding being alone with me too long, that he had made excuses. He said that he had not known for certain then, but that even the possibility had made him sick. He said that he should have told me, that he had been a coward, that there was no excuse. I tried to replay our nights together in my mind, counting backward, measuring closeness against timelines. My thoughts turned messy. I wanted desperately to believe him, to cling to anything that might make this nightmare a little less catastrophic. But doubt was already gnawing at me from the inside, whispering that I had no way of verifying any of it. My mind spun further. If Michael Hart was my biological father and Ryan's father, then Ryan and I were. I could not finish the sentence even in my head. The word felt too dirty, too horrifying, like something that would stain my brain if I thought it clearly. It felt like my skin was too tight for my body. I wanted to crawl out of myself and leave this version of me behind, a girl who went to cozy cafes and spent hours curled up with a man she thought might become her future, only to discover that he might be a blood tie disguised as chance. My mother tried to reach for my hand, telling me that we did not even know for sure whether Michael was truly my father. She said that the test had been done informally years ago, that paperwork might be missing, that there could be a mistake. She said that we could get another test done, that science could give us clarity. Her words did not comfort me. The fact that there was even a question was already a wound. Emily suggested that we sit down, that we breathe, that we make a plan. Her voice cracked on the word plan, as if she understood how ridiculous it sounded to talk about planning anything in the middle of that chaos. Ryan stayed standing near the door as if he was not sure whether he belonged in the conversation or whether he should leave. He looked at me like someone watching a fire they had helped start but could not put out. His eyes were glassy, and he looked genuinely undone. I had wanted for so long to see him vulnerable, to see him drop the charming, guarded facade. Now that it was happening, I wished desperately that I could unsee it. He said quietly that he had come because he could not keep pretending anymore, not after Chloe found out. He said she had gone into his room one day and accidentally seen an email he had drafted to his father but never sent, titled about Claire's daughter. She had confronted him, and he had broken down and told her everything. She had told him that keeping it from me was cruel, that I deserved to know before it was too late. She had threatened to tell me herself if he did not. That explained her message. I felt another twist of bitterness. People I barely knew were more willing to protect me than the ones who claimed to love me. The room felt smaller and smaller. The ceiling seemed lower, the shadows seemed darker. My chest hurt with every breath, and a dull ache had crept into my temples. My mother wiped her face and said that this was not the whole story, that there were things I still did not know. She said that if I was going to hate her, she wanted me to hate her for the right reasons. I laughed without meaning to. The sound that came out of me was ugly and broken, the kind of sound I didn't recognize as my own. I told her that I was already past hate, that I was just numb. She shook her head and said that there was more. That this entire situation, my birth, my father, even the way Ryan and I had met, was not as accidental as I believed. The hair on my arms rose. Emily muttered that our mother should not go there, that it would only make things worse. My mother shot her a look filled with exhausted anger and said that everything was already worse, that there was nothing left to lose. She looked at me directly then, her eyes dim but steady. She said that I needed to know that somebody else had been pulling strings for years, weaving this tangled web that had finally wrapped itself around my throat. She said that this was not just about an affair or a hidden letter or a withheld test result. She said that someone very close to me had taken what she had done and turned it into something much darker. My stomach flipped. I looked between her and Emily, then at Ryan, whose expression had shifted from guilt to dawning comprehension. My mother took a shaking breath and said that the reason she had insisted I keep certain people in my life, the reason she had never fully cut ties with particular family friends, the reason why Emily had ended up working where she worked, and the reason I had crossed paths with Ryan in the way I did, was because of a promise. A promise she had made years ago, under pressure, under threat. She said that after my father left us, someone had stepped in. Someone had offered financial help, legal advice, stability. Someone who had not done it out of pure kindness. She whispered that the real person behind all of this, the one who had orchestrated more than I could imagine, was not Michael Hart. It was someone else. Someone I trusted. Someone who had been in nearly every chapter of my life. And as she said that name, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees, and my heart jerked violently inside my chest. Because the name she spoke was a name I never thought I would hear tangled up in this nightmare. It was the name of the person I had spent my entire life defending, even when they did not deserve it. It was the name of the person I had always considered my last safe place whenever my mother felt too controlling and my father too absent. It was Emily's. My mother looked at me and said that Emily had made a deal behind my back years ago. And whatever that deal was, it had tied my life, my identity, and even my love life to secrets I had never agreed to carry. The realization hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I actually swayed on my feet. Because it was suddenly very clear that my sister's betrayal would be far bigger than a text to Ryan. Far bigger than a withheld confession. It would be something that had shaped my entire life without me even seeing it. And I knew, right then, that the worst of the story had not even been told yet. When my mother said Emily's name, it felt as though every molecule of air inside the room evaporated. I froze with my hand still gripping the back of the chair, my knuckles turning white. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt in my life. It wasn't just quiet, it was suffocating, like the world had paused to make room for the weight of what I had just heard. Emily didn't move. She didn't gasp, didn't argue, didn't even blink. She just stared straight ahead, her expression so unnervingly calm that it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. If guilt had a face, it didn't look remorseful at all, it looked calculating, composed, like Emily's. I whispered her name in a way that didn't sound like me, thin, trembling, barely human. My mother reached toward me again, her fingers curled as if she wanted to catch me before I fell, but I stepped away from her reflexively. I asked my mother what she meant. My voice trembled, but there was steel underneath it I didn't know I had. My mother turned to Emily slowly, giving her one last chance to deny it. Emily didn't. She simply exhaled and tilted her head, her jaw tightening the way it always did when she was preparing for an argument she intended to win. My mother said that after my father left, my non-biological father, the man who raised us briefly, she had been drowning in debt, fear, and isolation. She explained that she wasn't strong enough then, that she was terrified of losing the apartment, terrified of Michael's threats, terrified of raising 2 girls alone. She said she had turned to someone who offered help when she needed it most. And that someone wasn't a stranger. It was Emily. Years ago, when she was barely 18. My mother said Emily had approached Michael, yes, the same Michael Hart, behind her back. Emily had contacted him through a mutual acquaintance, telling him she knew about me, telling him that our mother was hiding his daughter and would eventually expose him if pushed too far. I felt the floor drop out from under me. My head buzzed, and for a moment, my hearing dimmed, like I was underwater. My mother said that Emily had struck a deal with him. In exchange for financial stability, career opportunities, and influence, Emily promised to keep tabs on me. She promised to ensure that I stayed within proximity of Michael's world without ever truly entering it. She promised to help manage potential fallout if I ever got too close to discovering the truth. As my mother spoke, Emily's face remained disturbingly blank. Not frozen with fear. Not overcome with guilt. Just blank. Like she had rehearsed this moment for years and felt nothing anymore. My mother said Emily had insisted that it was all for me, that she wanted to ensure I didn't fall through the cracks the way she thought I was destined to, that she wanted me to stay connected to powerful people, that she wanted to protect the family by taking control when our mother had been too emotionally unstable to do so. I stared at my sister. The girl who used to braid my hair before school. The girl who had ordered my birthday cupcakes when our mother forgot. The girl who always told me I was too soft, too naive, too trusting. The girl who had pretended to be my protector while manipulating my life like a puppet. My mother said Emily had done more than just arrange a deal. She said Emily had deliberately steered me into certain environments, towards certain people. She said Emily had known who Ryan was from the very beginning, long before I met him. Emily still didn't speak. But the slightest twitch in her jaw confirmed everything. My thoughts started racing backward through every memory I had with Ryan. Every coincidence. Every chance encounter. The first night I met him wasn't random. I had only been at that bar because Emily insisted I attend a colleague's farewell party to socialize more. She had even driven me there herself because she said parking would be impossible. I remembered how Emily had made an excuse that night about needing to leave early. She had said she trusted me to get home safely. But apparently, she had trusted something else entirely, fate, or manipulation, or whatever twisted belief she had that she was steering my life in the right direction. I felt bile rise in my throat. I looked at Ryan, and he looked as horrified as I felt. His eyebrows were drawn, his eyes red and watery. He looked like someone who had just realized the whole map of his life had been drawn in lies. He asked Emily why she did it. She answered finally. She said that she had watched our mother crumble after the truth about my father. She said she had watched me grow up fragile, emotional, easily hurt. She said she knew that Michael would never claim me, but she also knew he wouldn't allow me to ruin his life. She said that by staying in control, her control, she could make sure I never accidentally stumbled into something dangerous. She said it was all to protect me. I laughed then, a sharp, bitter sound that scraped my throat raw. It wasn't funny. It wasn't even close to funny. But it was the only sound that made sense in a moment where everything felt like a nightmare stitched together with invisible thread. I told her that controlling me wasn't protecting me. That arranging my life, manipulating my relationships, placing me in Michael's orbit like some disposable bargaining chip wasn't love. It was ownership. It was possession. It was obsession. Emily's eyes finally flashed. She stood, her posture rigid, and told me that she had done more for me than anyone, that without her I would have been poor, lost, fatherless, and ignored. She said I should be grateful that I had opportunities, education, connections. She said the world wasn't kind, and someone needed to be ruthless on my behalf. My mother shouted at her then, actually shouted, something I hadn't seen since I was a child. She said Emily had no right to determine my life, no right to make deals with a man who had abandoned me, no right to decide who I met or fell in love with. The word love hung in the air like an accusation. I turned back to Ryan then. He looked destroyed. Not guilty, not ashamed, destroyed. Like everything in him had snapped. He asked Emily if she had known from the start that he and I might be related. His voice cracked as he said it. Emily hesitated just long enough for me to feel something in my chest here. She said yes. That she had suspected. She said the minute she learned Ryan's last name, she knew. She said she thought that if we got close, we would both eventually find out on our own. She said she believed we would end things cleanly once we realized the truth, and everything would resolve itself. I felt my breath stop. Resolve itself. That was how she described the potential emotional devastation of discovering I had been romantically involved with a man who might share my blood. Ryan whispered that she was insane. That she had placed both of us in harm's way like it meant nothing. His voice was shaking, angry, wounded, hopeless. Emily dismissed him with a cold glance. She told him that he had always been weak, that he had always been too sensitive to handle the truth, that he should be grateful she had given him the chance to be the one to confess tonight so he wouldn't have to carry the guilt anymore. Ryan's face crumpled as if she had slapped him. The anger inside me boiled, bubbling beneath my ribs like lava. I asked Emily how she could claim to love me and still do this. How she could watch me fall for someone who might be my brother. How she could stand by while I built memories with him, laughed with him, trusted him, knowing it was all a lie. Emily's mouth tightened. She said that I always fell too hard, too fast. She said she thought I would move on quickly once I discovered the connection. She said she assumed Ryan would keep his distance. She said she didn't foresee it becoming so intense so quickly. She didn't foresee me falling in love with him. The world seemed to tilt. I didn't know whether I wanted to scream or collapse. Ryan covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. For the first time, he didn't look like the confident, charming man who had swept into my life like a storm. He looked like a boy who had been broken by circumstances he never chose. He whispered that he had tried to stay away, that he had tried to pull back when he learned the truth, that he had prayed it wasn't true. He said he had never wanted to hurt me, that meeting me had been a kind of happiness he didn't think he deserved. Tears stung my eyes, hot and bitter. But I held them back. Crying felt like giving someone permission to comfort me. And no one in that room deserved that. My mother grabbed Emily's arm then and said she needed to tell me the final part of the story, the part she had hoped she'd never have to say. Emily tried to pull away, but my mother's fingers dug in harder. She said that Emily had not just manipulated my meeting with Ryan. She had also blocked every man I had ever dated before him. She had told lies, interfered, sabotaged relationships quietly, strategically. She said Emily had always acted cold and judgmental toward the men I chose because she was intentionally making them disappear. She said Emily believed no one was good enough for me. But that wasn't the whole truth. She didn't want anyone interfering with the plan. The plan to keep me close to the Hart family. The plan to keep Michael's secret from exploding. Emily finally snapped then, shouting that she had done what she needed to do, that if our mother hadn't been so weak, so emotional, so irresponsible, none of this would have happened. She said she refused to let our family fall apart because of a mistake she didn't make. Our mother recoiled as if Emily had slapped her. It was only then that Emily's composure cracked. Her voice dropped, trembling for the first time. She said she had spent her entire life cleaning up everyone's messes, our father's departure, our mother's breakdowns, my naive heartbreaks. She said she had been forced into responsibility too early, that she had been the adult long before either of us. She said she had sacrificed everything for this family. She said she deserved gratitude. I told her that gratitude was not what you earned by controlling a person's entire life. Gratitude was not what you got by letting your sister fall for someone she might share blood with. Gratitude was not something you demanded when what you did was manipulation, coercion, and emotional violence. The words flew out of me before I realized I was shaking. I felt a roaring in my ears, a rage that had been building for years without a name. Ryan stepped toward me, but I backed away instinctively. I didn't want him near me. I didn't want his comfort. I didn't want anything that reminded me of the lie we had become. He stopped short, pain flashing across his face. My mother said we needed to breathe, that we needed to sit, that we needed to find some path forward. I told her there was no forward. Not tonight. Not with them. I grabbed my coat and shoved my shoes onto my feet. Emily tried to stop me, reaching out with a desperate look in her eyes, but I recoiled like she was fire. She whispered that she couldn't let me walk out like this, that it wasn't safe, that I needed clarity before doing anything impulsive. Her words sounded like cages. I told her that the only danger I had ever been in was the danger she created. Then I left. I didn't slam the door. I closed it quietly because the silence felt more powerful than any dramatic exit could. The hallway was cold, and I breathed in the icy air like it was the first clean breath I'd taken in years. My legs shook beneath me as I descended the stairwell, gripping the railing so I wouldn't fall. Every step echoed like footsteps in an empty church. When I finally reached the outside, the night air hit me full force. My lungs stung, and my vision blurred, but I walked. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed distance. Space. Air that wasn't poisoned by secrets. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Ryan. Then Emily. Then my mother. Then Chloe. I turned it off. And I walked until my feet were numb and my thoughts stopped screaming and my breath no longer hitched in my chest. Hours later, I stood on a bridge overlooking the city lights, watching them flicker like stars from a life I didn't belong to anymore. The wind tugged at my coat, cold enough to sting my cheeks. Far below, the river rushed past like it had somewhere important to be, something I envied. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong. But because the truth had drained me dry. I stood there until the sky turned pale with dawn. And I whispered to myself, not to Ryan, not to Emily, not to my mother, that everything from this day forward would be mine. My choices. My life. My truth. Even if I had to rebuild myself from ashes. Even if I had to walk alone.